Book of Proverbs. Today, last week we looked at fear of God, fear of the Lord. And so today we're going to go back and relook at a little bit more in depth, the fool. The fool. Man, I tell you, that snow looks so cool out there. It's like a snow globe, you know? It's so nice. For those of you who don't like winter, I'm just so sorry for you. But for those of us who like winter, I'm just digging it tremendously. Loving it. But anyhow, we're going to look at the fool. And, as we saw from the beginning in looking at this manual for life that we call Proverbs, collection of Proverbs, is that it's about God's wisdom. I mean, the bottom line in Proverbs is attaining God's wisdom for life. And throughout Proverbs, there's this comparison contrast thing that's going on. And one of the things we looked at as we were going through a few passages is where the comparison is between the wise person and the foolish person. We did a little bit of light definition on that, but didn't really cover it in detail. So today I really want to look more in detail at the difference between the fool and the wise, and we'll hone in on the foolish person, and it really is, the wise person is just really the brightness of the wise person is shown against this backdrop of the darkness of foolishness and what foolishness is all about. And I know I shared with you all. Let me put it in the form of a question, make sure that I communicated it, okay? Can a person be extremely intelligent and be a fool? Yes, this is something that needs to be understood. And when we're looking at biblical foolishness and the word fool as used in Proverbs, person can have all kinds of degrees, can be, score extremely high on their IQ, and be, maybe, in my opinion, some of the worst kind of fools. Why do I say the worst? Because they should know better, But there's a reason for that, and I want to see what your thoughts are, why it appears that oftentimes people who believe themselves to be extremely intelligent and can actually score high on any test that you would give them end up being very foolish. And why is that the case? So I don't want you to answer that right now. I want you to think about that one as we go through looking at Proverbs and the fool, why you think that is the case. Or if you think that's the case. It sure has been my experience to see people who are very gifted with intelligence, and they're absolutely foolish. Biblical foolish, okay? Biblical foolishness is more of a moral or a spiritual condition than an intellectual condition. They have no fear of the Lord, as we talked about last week. And I like to put it this way, a proper fear of the Lord, as we discussed last week. And remember, there's two different kinds of fear of the Lord. And so anyhow, they don't have that proper fear of the Lord. Matter of fact, Psalm 14:1 would say, the fool says in their heart, what? There is no God. And they begin with that premise. And all of life and worldview flows out of their premise. They began with, there is no God. And that is the fool. So in Proverbs, just like the Greek and other foreign languages, sometimes our English language is not sufficient to really cover these Hebrew words. And so in the Hebrew, there are basically 4 different types of words that they would use that we would translate fool. It's kind of like the word love. You know, how many Greek words are there that describe, that we translate simply love? 5? 6? 6. Do I hear 7? 7, do I hear 8? 8, could I hear? I don't know if I had shared this with you guys before, but in Greek, there are 4 basic words, very specific nuances of love. Because, you know, in the English language, we say, you know, I love my wife, I love my new truck, I love my dog, you know, I love hunting. Really, are those all the same? Well, some guys, it may be, but I don't think so, right? And so, you know, you've got your agape love, which is the highest form of love, and I got a definition for that. Phileo love, and then you got stergos, which is basically natural love, which is almost instinctual love, and you got eros, which is sexual love. And so, you know, the Greek has different words for, and so does the Hebrew, talking about the fool. And so that's why we get confused when we're reading Proverbs and we think fool. Come on, what do we think of when we use the word fool in our day and age? That dude's a fool. We think they're what? Give me another a synonym for what we would say fool is. Go ahead, say it. I didn't hear it. Idiot. Stupid. Crazy, numbskull. So all those things, right? Well, let me share with you what Proverbs, utilizing the Hebrew, and I'm not going to teach you a bunch of Hebrew today. I'll just show you utilizing some synonyms with that most translations, and I say most because some translations now have tried to bring out that translation for that word, fool. And there are basically 4 of them. One is, and I'm not even going to try read the Hebrew word for you, but basically is more of a gullible type person. The person who is, by the way, just as in there's different levels of love in the Greek language, there's different levels of fool in the Hebrew language. And so you have some fools that are mild or, you know, not as bad fools, and then you got the worst of the fools. So we'll start with the mildest and we'll work our way up. And so the first kind of fool is the one that's really kind of naive kind of fool. And, you know, they're the ones who kind of drift aimlessly. They're the ones that are easily prone to temptation. And they get themselves into situations where they will fall to temptation. Kind of drifters, inexperienced people, foolish. Let me find an example in Proverbs to help illustrate it. Proverbs 14 and verse 15. Yeah. Oh, I like how the NIV does translate this particular word fool. It says in Proverbs 14:15, a simple person believes anything, but a prudent person gives thought to his steps. So again, this comparison contrast between the fool, in this case, the nuance of the fool is the mildest. It's the simpleton. You know, it's the simple person. Gullible, believes anything. Have you ever met anybody like that? And so instead of staying true to the Word of God, they just believe whatever is the latest flavor of the day of the week, and they just go with that. And you say this, and they go with this. Very gullible, very easily. Well, the kind of people that be candidates for a cult. They don't stick with their own beliefs; they go with everybody else's. Very gullible. Very easily, and I've met folks like that, and I'm sure you have as well. Then there's another level after we leave the gullible, which is, you know, the simpleton. By the way, I like getting other translations, and I didn't spin this through the translations. Lori, what do you have? 14:15. Simpleton? Yeah. Okay. Vera, how about yours? 14:15. Did I catch you off guard? Just fool? They actually translated fool. Okay, good, good, good. NASB. Okay, there you go. Naive and sensible. Very good. So you're getting the nuance there on this Hebrew word that is a form of fool. Do you get what I'm saying? I don't know if you guys are into languages, but in Hebrew you've got this root word, and from that root word you build a word off of it. And so all these different Hebrew words are all built on the root word that we would utilize as fool. And so this is just a shred out of that fool. Okay. All right, so then you leave that naive simpleton, that driftless, aimless, gullible person, and then you move up to another level, and that's one who comes to enjoy their folly. Let me share a couple of Proverbs on that in that regard. 18. Proverbs 18 and verse 2. A fool finds no pleasure in understanding, but delights in airing his own opinion. Loves to hear himself or herself talk. They don't want to understand. They want to talk. Here's how, I won't get into too much of tools for healthy marriages. Let Donna handle that, which, by the way, a little plug for that on Monday night. All the info is right back there. But how foolish we can get in some ways in which we talk to one another in marriage. And when you are talking, I call this when your spouse is talking to you and you're not really listening to understand, you're listening to refute, we're being the fool. We're playing the fool. Instead of wanting to listen to understand, a fool finds no pleasure in understanding, but delights in airing their own opinion. In other words, enough of what you got to say, you need to hear what I have to say. Wait a minute. That's not how you work relationships. And maybe you have people that you work with, people in your family, and please don't you be that person. One of the greatest compliments, one of the greatest expressions of love is listening. I mean, really, truly listening to understand. It's truly a gift. I've said a long time ago, if you want to have a good relationship with any human being, especially your spouse, be a good listener. Be a really good listener. That really expresses love. When you don't listen, what you're really saying to another human being is, all right, you're not worth as much as I am, you know. And some people got it to, they got this disease to almost a lethal level. But a fool, this level of fool, is just another level of foolishness. Love to hear themselves talk. Their top quality is really described as stupid. Chapter 13, verse 16. Let me share with you that. Okay. That's not how the NIV translates it, though. 13:16. Every prudent man acts out of knowledge, but a fool expresses his folly. They haven't listened. They're not trying to understand. And I said expresses, I meant exposes his folly. Every prudent man acts out of knowledge, but a fool exposes his folly. Down verse, 6 and 7. No, that's not the one I want. Chapter 29, Proverbs 29, 11 and 12. Is that right? Yeah. A fool gives full vent to his anger, but a wise person keeps himself under control. If a ruler listens to lies, all his officials become wicked. So a fool would give full vent to his anger, but a wise person keeps himself under control. Chapter 14. Where is it? Verse 8. Yeah, here's a good one. The wisdom of the prudent is to give thought to the ways, but the folly of fools is deception. Fools mock. Oh, I'll get to that later. I don't want to get to verse 9 yet. Let's see, verse 20. Let's see, 14. Chapter 15. Chapter 15, verse 2. The tongue of the wise commends knowledge, but the mouth of the fool gushes folly. They speak foolishness. All right? In the same chapter, verse 14, the discerning heart seeks knowledge, but the mouth of a fool feeds on folly. And so the person who believes in God, the person who trusts in God, they're always seeking out God's word, God's knowledge. But the fool is all about their own opinion, about their own way, and they continue to spout that doctrine of themselves and of their own humanism, if you will, and their own intellect. Chapter 17, verse 12. Why have I got 17:12? That's not the right verse. No, skip that. Am I looking the right place? Okay. I got to get my glasses fixed. Yeah, better to meet a bear robbed of her cubs than a fool in his folly. Well, we all know about bears and cubs. That's a dangerous situation. But to join in with a foolish person, a person who is, we call it stupid. That seems like a harsh term, doesn't it? But it's a person who lacks the knowledge of God. That's what they're talking about. Not intellectually stupid, but rather they're lacking of a desire or a willingness to abide by the word of God stupid. Hopefully that makes sense. And so a person who is living out of that is worse than being in the middle of a bear robbed of her cubs, okay? And, these bifocals aren't working like they used to. 26, chapter 26. And now this is pretty extensive here in dealing with this type of fool. And what fools of this category have a tendency to do, and this is where I'm priming you for that question. I want to leave enough time at the end to answer. Why does it seem like people who seem to have the greatest intelligence according to the world standards, end up being the most foolish? Why is that? And why do they continue in it? All right? Because these type of fools have a tendency to continue with their foolishness, to repeat their foolishness. And we see that over and over again. One of the verses that comes to mind is, as a pig that has been freshly washed goes back to the mud, or, this gets gross, as a dog goes back to its vomit, so a fool continues in their foolishness. Why is that? Why is that? So anyhow, that's for the end. I want you to have plenty of time to think about that. So look at chapter 26. This is one of the, I think, the largest section in Proverbs dealing with the fool, and this particular type of fool, the Kessel fool in Hebrew. Like snow in summer or rain in harvest, honor is not fitting a fool. Like a fluttering sparrow or a darting swallow, an undeserved curse does not come to rest. A whip for a horse, a halter for the donkey, and a rod for the backs of fools. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you'll be like him yourself. Answer a fool according to his folly, or he'll be wise in his own eyes. Seems quite contradictory there, doesn't it? We talked about that one earlier. We'll come back to it. Get the bifocals working. 6. Like cutting off one's feet or drinking violence is the sending of a message by the hand of a fool. Like a lame man's legs that hang limp is a proverb in the mouth of a fool. He doesn't know what to do with it. It's helpless. 8, I like this one. I mean, this is a great, verbal visual. Like tying a stone in a sling is the giving of honor to a fool. Imagine a stone tied in a sling and they swing it, wow, it comes back and hits you in the head. 9, like a thorn bush in a drunkard's hand is a proverb in the mouth of a fool. It just does damage. 10, like an archer who wounds at random is he who hires a fool or just any passerby. Verse 11, as a dog returns to his vomit, so a fool repeats his folly. Why? And the coup de grace of this passage to me is verse 12. Do you see a man wise in his own eyes? There's more hope for a fool than for him, which is just another variation of the fool. So they have a tendency to repeat what they do. A fool living foolishly causes much harm. All right, so we've gone up 2 levels of foolishness. Now we go to the third type of fool. And this is a little bit more hardened of a type of fool. This one is more persistent even in their foolishness. Chapter 15 and verse 5 is an example of this particular word of a fool. All the days of the oppressed are wretched, but the cheerful heart has a continue. Now I know I got that verse wrong. Where have I got that wrong? Wait a minute. 14 and verse 9 then. Yeah, 14 and verse 9. Just back up a little bit. Fools mock at making amends for sin. This is where you can see it's a little bit more hardened. Fools mock at making amends for sins, but goodwill is found among the upright. Okay, so this is more of the stubborn kind of fool. And so, and by the way, I just read that wrong. You go back to chapter 15. I thought it's verse 5 in chapter 15. A fool spurns his father's discipline, but whoever heeds correction shows prudence. So a fool spurns his father's discipline. And contrast that with the one who heeds correction, and again showing prudence. So that's a more hardened one. And obviously Solomon's talking about your biological father and not listening to what they have to say. But also it could apply to our Heavenly Father. Then we get to the worst of the worst kind of fools, and that is, and this is going to be a clue, especially to all you Old Testament scholars here, And I'll give you the Hebrew word for it. And then you can tell me where that ties into the Old Testament, okay? Nabal. Nabal is the Hebrew word for this fool. This is the worst of the fools. Does that remind you of anything? Cheryl's going like, uh-huh. Anybody else? All right, we'll come back to that in just a minute. But it's the worst of fools. It's the one who declares there's no God. I mean, they outwardly say and raise a rebellious fist to God that there is no God. This is the worst of the fools. We looked at the passage in Psalm 14:1, but also in Proverbs chapter 30 and 21 through 23 in the sayings of Agur. The sayings of Agur, son of Jekiah, an oracle. This man declared to Ithiel, and blah, 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 so on. Verse 2, I am the most ignorant of men. I do not have a man's understanding. I have not learned wisdom, nor have I knowledge of the Holy One. Okay, so this is the kind of person who denies God and just lives a life in total defiance of any even notion of God. So, going back to Nabal, the Hebrew word, that reminded Cheryl of something. She immediately grinned when I said it, so she must know the story. No, the rest of you don't? No problem. What is it? Yeah, Abigail's husband. Do you remember that in 1 Samuel chapter 25? There's a story there about David, and he was kind of out in the fields with all his guys. And when he was out there, he and his men would protect the sheep of this particular guy. And they've been doing this for some time, and so they said, hey, we've been providing security for this man and all of his sheep. Send a couple of guys down to his house and see if he can't help us out with a little bit of grub. So they send him down. And this guy, his name is Nabal, Nabal. He says, who is this David that I should care about him? And, oh man, he insulted David big time. So the men went back, and they told David what he had said. You know what David said, right? He said, guys, put on your swords. We're going to go pay Nabal a visit. And, Lord forbid that should a man in Nabal's household live come sundown. Translation, I'm going to kill every one of those guys. So, he jumps on his camels. They head on to Nabal's place. And there was this very wise woman who found out what her husband did. Her name is Abigail. Abigail said, oh my goodness. So she puts together all this food. She runs quick to intercede with David and says, oh, I'm so sorry. Matter of fact, let me get the exact quote for you because it's pretty cool. 1 Kings chapter 25. 1 Samuel chapter 25-ish. Somewhere in there. 1 Samuel 25. Oh, okay. So Abigail takes all these raisin cakes and all this cheese and stuff, and she gets there and sees David. When Abigail saw David, I'm in verse 23 of chapter 25 of 1 Samuel. When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey. She bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, my Lord, let the blame be on me alone. Please let your servant speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. May my Lord pay no attention to that wicked man, Nabal. He is just like his name. His name is Fool. Fool. And folly goes with him. But as for me, your servant, I did not see your men my master sent. So, this man's name, who names their kid Nabal? Hey, honey, what do you want to call our kid? Let's call him Fool. How does this come about? I don't know. Or maybe it was that they were raising their kid, and maybe they named him something like Saul or, Hosea or something like that. But through life, he was really, a dumb kid. Not dumb. That's not what I mean to say. Dumb as in he was not a godly kid and said, we're going to name you Nabal from here on. I don't know. How do you do that? You don't go through the Hebrew book of names and say, I'm going to name my kid Nabal, right? But that's this guy's name. And his is the worst kind of foolishness. He didn't respect God. He didn't respect man. And by the way, isn't there a direct correlation between the two? You think about it. If you can live in a society where you don't believe God exists, it's not hard for you to disrespect your fellow human being. Not hard at all. I was reading a Schaeffer quote here that I had posted, I don't know, Facebook brings these things up, a year ago, 4 years ago, or whatever. And a Schaeffer quote talking about, if there is no God, how do you establish morality? Think about it. If there is no God, and if you live as if there is no God, how do you establish morality? By that I mean, what's right, what's wrong? How do you do it? Somebody please at least step in and support the atheist argument for that. How would they do it? I'm opening that up for a wise discussion. How do you do it? Okay. What if my parent was Charles Manson? Wow. That's how I define my morality? I mean, really, seriously. I mean, that is one. I'm not making fun of or anybody's example or anything. I just want to know, how do we do it? How do we define what's right or wrong? Yeah. There are things that people do say, though. Let's just... Jason, is it wrong to murder people? Why? No. You can't be you right now. You've got to be the secular humanist, and you got to tell me now why it's wrong to kill fellow human beings. Mm-hmm. So what? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what most people agree would be prohibitive, right? I mean, nobody wants to get murdered. And we pretty well agree. So in philosophy circles, we call that argumentum ad populum, the argument of the many. And so we justify it because most people agree murder is wrong. That all sounds good when you're talking about murder. What about when you... I'm sorry, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes. That's Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. And there's nothing wrong with doing that as long, those are godly principles. That's God's word speaking. That's the golden rule, right? All right, let's take it to something that is not as popular as don't murder each other. How about talk about having borders around sexual behavior? Oh, now our argumentum starts getting a little different. You'll start getting a group of people who will say, well, homosexuality is okay. Okay, if that's okay, then is pedophile okay? Well, no, it's not okay, because now to the same degree that we're against murder, we're against pedophile. Well, what if you had a group of people that said it was okay? Does that now make it okay? See, that's where you really get meddling, because every group feels like their sexuality is the okay thing. Follow what I'm saying? Let me go back to the murder thing, though. And this is the one that was actually brought up in Nuremberg during the trial of the Nazis. They said we're a sovereign nation. We have agreed that it is okay to murder and annihilate the Jews. So you have a majority decision in that country that says it's okay. That was their claim. We're a sovereign nation. Who are you to come in and tell us what we can do against anybody? What was wrong with their argument? And how did the Allies argue against that in court? You have to appeal to a standard that is above humans, which is God. It's an amazing argument. And it's the truth. So, you think about the ramifications of this fool. And it goes to Stalin. It goes to Hitler. It goes to Mussolini. It goes to Pol Pot. And it goes to all these genocidal people who cannot have an understanding of God. In a godless worldview, this is the worst kind of fool there is. This is the one that millions have been killed over and murdered and so on. Not to mention the unborn that have been murdered over the years as a result of this kind of fool. You cannot have a view of God and continue in that behavior. So that's the worst kind of fool. And that's the kind of guy this Nabal was. I still am mystified why anyone would name their kid Nabal. But there must be some reason. Maybe you guys know of a reason. I don't know. Research it out this week. But there's two other kind of folks, the mocker and the lazy person, I want to talk about real quick. The mocker. Oh, man. Chapter what? Oh, I mean, there's several places, but I want to pick out a couple of good ones here. 9 and what is it, verse 8? 9 and verse 8. Do not rebuke a mocker or he'll hate you. Rebuke a wise man, he'll love you. You know, the mocker is a person who makes sport of others. They love making fun of others. And it's so easy to do. Why is it so easy to do? Why is this the easiest, the most laziest form of humor? It's real easy, and I'll go ahead and use myself as an example. There's plenty to make fun of. There isn't a single human being that doesn't have their foibles and their problems, and whether they speak funny, look funny, you know, whatever. We make mistakes, and the mocker is the kind of person who likes to make fun of others and also does not like to receive criticism. See, really, this type of person, this kind of character goes by this age-old principle where people who want to try to puff themselves up because they are actually small. And the way that they think that they're going to do it is by bringing others down. They think they make themselves look bigger. And they don't even do this consciously. They just continue to operate out of their smallness and try to make themselves look bigger by cutting others down. Kids do this all the time. Remember being in middle school, cut downs after cut down after cut down, you know? And this is the mocker. This is the mocker, the cut down, the make fun of others person. And I remember I had a men's group a couple of decades ago. We were out putting in a ramp for somebody. And it was about a dozen guys. And it was one cut down after another to each other. You know. And the following day was a Sunday. We did the work on Saturday. The following day was a Sunday. And Scott came to me and said, Tom, I felt terrible at that work thing. He says, we're supposed to be Christian men. We're supposed to be building one another up. And these guys just kept cutting each other down. It was one cut down after another. And I said, man, you know what? That's my sermon for today. And you're right. And so, you know, we had a good talking about that. Why do we do that? Why? I don't know if gals do that. I've never seen gals in the business. Maybe they do. But I'm telling you that sometimes guys can get into that, and it's not a good thing. And the wise person, the prudent person, if they hear a rebuke or if they hear criticism, constructive criticism, they love you for it. But the mocker just wants to make fun of you. They just want to make fun of others at your expense. Okay? And by the way, here's a rule of thumb that I've been trying to live by, and that is that if the other person is the butt of the joke, it's not funny. It's not funny. No, it's not. If the other person ends up being the butt of the joke, it's not funny. And so I think we ought to think about that. Mockers are very proud. They're very conceited. Chapter 21, verse 24. Then I'll sit down. But let's just get this one in. Chapter 21 and verse 24. The proud and arrogant man, mocker is his name. He behaves with overweening pride. Overweening pride. Okay. Let's pick up there next week. I want to talk about lazy. Okay. But mockers, oh, please don't fall into the cheap, easy way of humor by being a mocker, because let's just put it this way: it's just flat sinful, and it's not good for you. Okay, thank you.